1177 BC and the collapse of ancient civilizations. Today, we're investigating one of the absolute most thrilling mysteries of all time. We're going to explore exactly how an interconnected, globalized ancient world, one that had thrived for literally 2,000 years, just suddenly came crashing down.
We're going to start right in the middle of the terror of 1177 BC. Imagine receiving a desperate, panicked message like this written on a clay tablet by the king of Ugarit to the king of Cyprus. It drops us directly into the chaos of a civilization facing imminent destruction. He's saying his troops are gone, stationed elsewhere, and 7 enemy ships have just arrived and are setting fire to his cities. Now, scholars once believed this tablet was never actually sent, because it was found baked in a kiln as the city burned. But actually, scratch that. We now know it was most likely a copy of a dispatch that did get sent out. But by then, it was way too late. The enemy was already at the gates.
The sheer chaos of this invasion is just mind-blowing. The records left behind at the mortuary temple of Egyptian pharaoh Ramses III vividly illustrate this desperate fight for survival against an unstoppable mass of humanity that we call the Sea Peoples. The carvings literally show enemies floating upside down, clearly dead in the water, while others are fiercely fighting hand-to-hand from their boats. For most nations, resistance was completely futile. The mighty Hittites, the Mycenaeans, the Canaanites, the Cypriots, they all fell. Egypt, under Ramses III, was the only major power to successfully resist, but it was a massive Pyrrhic victory. Egypt survived, sure, but it was honestly never the same again.
So, a crucial point here. These invaders weren't just one single unified nation. The Egyptians documented a very shadowy coalition of 6 distinct groups: the Pilaset, the Jeker, the Shekelesh, the Shardana, the Danuna, and the Weshish. Basically, foreign-sounding names for foreign-looking people. They left absolutely no written inscriptions of their own, which means we only know them through the terrified eyes of their victims. The Pilaset are generally accepted as the Philistines. The Danuna are often linked to Homer's Danans from the Aegean, while the Shekelesh and Shardana, they might be linked to Sicily and Sardinia. They just moved relentlessly, leaving this massive trail of death and destruction across all the great powers of the day.
If you look closely at the crime scene evidence left on the Egyptian temple walls, you can visually confirm this incredible diversity. You'll notice all these different headdresses. Some are feathered, some are horned, some are completely bareheaded. And their clothing varies wildly too. Some wear short kilts, while others wear much longer garments. These intricate details strongly suggest we're looking at fundamentally different cultures banding together. And they didn't just come on boats. They arrived in wagons and ox carts, heavily loaded down with their families and all their possessions. So this tells us they were intensely motivated by migration and maybe the search for spoils, rather than just being a traditional, disciplined invading army.
Part 1. The Victim. A look at the globalized Bronze Age.
To truly understand the magnitude of this historical crime, we have to look at what was actually lost. Let's flash back about 3 centuries. The world of the late Bronze Age was surprisingly sophisticated and deeply, deeply interconnected. Stretching across these vast land masses, you've got the mighty Hittite Empire up in Anatolia, dominating what is now modern-day Turkey. Down the coast, we find the sprawling Egyptian Empire, and then the magnificent kingdoms of the Mycenaeans and Minoans over in the Aegean Sea. And to the east, the Babylonians and the Assyrians. These massive empires took centuries to evolve. They were constantly interacting through trade, intense diplomacy, and even royal marriages. They were all major players on a massive international stage.
To help us track our investigation, it's super helpful to map these ancient kingdoms directly onto our modern geography. For instance, the ancient kingdom of Wallachia, that's modern Cyprus, which was famous back then for its incredibly rich copper ore. Tunisia represents mainland Greece. Pakanana and Retinu are the areas we now call Canaan, stretching right across modern-day Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. Recognizing these modern locations proves just how unbelievably vast this ancient network of globalization truly was. I mean, it was functioning across thousands of miles of rough land and open sea.
And this brings us right to the core motive and the context behind their entire economic system. Scholar Carol Bell made this absolutely fascinating observation. She said that just as our modern global economy is hopelessly dependent on the continuous flow of crude oil, these ancient empires were completely interdependent on the trade of tin. Think about it. To make weapons-grade bronze, you obviously needed copper from places like Cyprus, but you absolutely had to mix it with tin. And that tin had to be brought over land, all the way from specific mines in the Badakhshan region of Afghanistan. Supplying tin preoccupied the pharaohs back then exactly the same way supplying gasoline to drivers preoccupies our modern politicians today.
I literally love these incredibly specific historical anecdotes because they completely shatter the misconception that the ancient world was just disconnected and primitive. Get this, around 1750 BC, King Zimrilim in modern-day Syria actually built an ice house on the Euphrates River just so he could enjoy summer drinks chilled with mountain ice. And we have diplomatic records showing that the famous lawgiver King Hammurabi of Babylon was gifted a pair of imported leather shoes from Crete, and he actually returned them. No way, right? We even have a highly detailed 214-day training manual written by a Mitannian master horse trainer named Kikuli. This level of cultural exchange and luxury trade is just astonishing.
The incredible tomb paintings from this era vividly bring that interconnected world to life. In an Egyptian tomb at Beni Hassan, you can see Semitic merchants from Canaan bringing their goods directly into Egypt. And then, in the tomb of an Egyptian vizier named Rekhmare, we clearly see men dressed in Aegean-style kilts carrying distinctively Aegean objects, identified as coming from Crete and the islands in the midst of the sea. It shows all these diverse, international visitors and diplomats bringing extravagant gifts to Egypt, gathering together much like world leaders at a modern-day G8 summit.
But it wasn't just trade, it was highly advanced warfare too. Look at the Battle of Megiddo in 1479 BC. Pharaoh Thutmose III holds a war council and deliberately ignores his general's advice to take the safe, wide routes. Instead, he takes a massive tactical gamble. He funnels his entire army through a narrow, highly dangerous central pass, banking entirely on the psychological calculation that his enemy would never expect him to be so reckless. And it worked. He caught the Canaanites completely by surprise. Amazingly, over 3,000 years later during World War I, British General Edmund Allenby read about this exact same tactic, replicated it, and won at the very same location. It perfectly highlights the complex geopolitics and advanced military strategies governing these flourishing empires.
So we have clearly established just how incredibly advanced and interconnected this society was, which brings us to a really crucial question in our historical mystery. Did this shadowy group of invaders, the Sea Peoples, actually have the power to single-handedly destroy an entire globalized world? Could a mob rolling up on ox carts really take down the likes of the mighty Hittites, the Mycenaeans, and all the rest?
Well, here is the massive twist in our explainer. For decades, scholars definitely used the Sea Peoples as a convenient scapegoat, but recent evidence reveals that the Sea Peoples were very likely a symptom, not the sole root cause. They were probably acting as opportunistic refugees, fleeing their own disasters in the West, migrating eastward only to encounter these great empires that were already in a steep decline. They didn't just topple a strong, healthy system, it's more like they kicked down a door that was already rotting from the inside out.
The true culprit was a devastating systems collapse. It was essentially a perfect storm of calamities. There's real geological evidence of earthquake storms, a series of devastating seismic events occurring over decades. On top of that, there were severe climate change and massive droughts causing widespread famine. This, inevitably, led to internal rebellions and intense social unrest. And because these nations were so hyper-dependent on each other for things like tin and grain, the severing of vital international trade routes created a fatal domino effect. If one single node in the network fell, the whole intertwined system came crashing to a halt.
I want to leave you with this somewhat haunting thought. When we look back at the shattered remains of these interdependent ancient civilizations, we kind of have to wonder just how fragile our own modern globalized society truly is. Today, our economies, our complex supply chains, and our political fortunes are just as inextricably intertwined as those of the Hittites, the Egyptians, and the Mycenaeans. A shock to one side of the globe drastically affects the other. So understanding 1177 BC isn't just an exercise in ancient history, it's a stark warning about the hidden vulnerabilities within our own interconnected world. What do you think? Are we heading for our own Bronze Age collapse? Thanks for exploring this historical mystery with me, and keep questioning the past.